All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 5 of our Data as a Feature webinar series, Managing the Experience plus Ad Hoc Reporting. And as you can see by the subtitle, we're going to be talking about defining security and delivering self-service BI or reporting as part of the application, this bike application, which we'll introduce you to if you haven't been tuning into the rest of the series. But really, this webinar is about, in the previous webinars, we talked about setting up the application. We've talked about reports and visualizations that were designed as part of the application or for the application. We've looked at embedding and integrating them into the application. And in this one, we're talking about how all of this BI experience within your app is done in a secure manner. So there, in our example, we have different users where we need to grant certain access levels based on who they are and what sort of experience we want to deliver to them. The same thing goes for self-service reporting. There might be certain data requirements that they have that are unique to each of those individuals. So we're really going to be sinking our teeth into how all of the security was set up for this particular demo app in today's session. And if you haven't had a chance to look at our demo application, it's actually available on jaspersoft.com, and there's a guided prompted tour that walks you through the application narrative and shows how Jaspersoft, in this case, the product we'll be looking at today, would fit into the app, and tells you a little bit about how it's built. So it's really just a great prerequisite to check out before we get into a lot of the more granular information that we're covering throughout the series. And we've had a number of speakers come on throughout the series that had various roles as a part of this project to develop our demo application. And in today's session, we're going to have Sherman Wood come back and join us. He's, again, the Director of Solutions Consulting worldwide at TIBCO, and he's focused on the Jaspersoft product based in San Francisco, California. And Sherman was heavily involved in a number of aspects of the application, but security is one thing that is very near and dear to his heart. And he had before being in a solution consulting role, he worked on the engineering team and professional services, and actually has probably the most intimate knowledge of security when it comes to Jaspersoft. So very fortunate to have him on to present this portion of the demo app. And to give everyone a sense of what the agenda is going to look like, we're going to start off with just a general introduction to security and embedded BI. When you talk about embedding software into other software, what are some of the implications of that, and what are some of the things you need to think about when it comes to security? And to do that as you scale additional users or add additional customers. The second thing that we'll look at after we kind of talk about this at a conceptual level is how is security actually implemented in the demo application itself. We'll walk you through that portion. And then the second half of today's presentation is really going to be talking about self-service, or what we call ad hoc reporting, and how that was delivered as part of the demo app, how that was done in a secure way, what sort of capabilities self-service reporting gives to your end user, and kind of what sort of use cases that would fit. And also how, just at a high level, how that embedding process works as well, of putting that self-service reporting design environment inside of the demo app. And then finally, as we've done in all of these presentations, we want to share a few key takeaways from everything that we covered in today's session. What are some things that you might want to think about as you go about your own embedded BI project and doing some of the things we're talking about in today's session? So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass you over to Sherman Wood, who's going to take you through the rest of today's session.
All right, Shane, thank you for that. Yeah, this whole security thing with Jaspersoft, I actually wrote most of it back in the day. So a lot of things we did with bike share and some of the general concepts. We have been working on this for many years, and we're well over 1,000 customers nowadays. So really is battle tested. Never met a security requirement we haven't been able to fulfill. So let's see what it all means. So you will have, if you've listened to some of the other webinars in this series, we've sort of presented this a few times, but it's just good to redo it in the context of what we're going to be talking about today. So embedded analytics, embedded business intelligence is really about delivering information to your audiences who are generally there to just consume information. They're not analysts, they just want to they're in their application or portal and they just want to consume information in the right way. So that means you as application or portal developers have to think about how to deliver that. So what is that? What are the components of that? People want visualizations and dashboards, interactive mechanisms to present and work with the information. Still need reports, want to get data or visualizations out of the application for use downstream. That could be a PDF, but it could also be things like something for Excel or CSV for data purposes downstream. When you're doing web apps, often the user experience, the web front end needs just maybe straight data. Okay, I just want data to, and we'll see in the bike share piece how you could just plug data directly from Jaspersoft into a visualization like a map, right? And then finally, the thing that is really the secret sauce for embedded is self-service. Like you can create a user experience that gives you a very guided workflow and interactivity and so on, but you need to give self-service to your end audience because as application owners or portal owners, you will never be able to keep up with the data requirements, information requirements of your consumers. So if you can enable them to create their own experience and then use that in the context of the app and do these other things like the visualizations and dashboards, the reports, for example, everybody will be a lot happier. Okay. But in order to do this sort of thing, you need to think about how that audience is going to interact with the environment, right? So you've got your portal and application there, you've got Jaspersoft sitting behind the scenes because it's embedded, and with Jaspersoft, you need to identify and pass the user, authenticate the user coming into Jaspersoft, so all the downstream security mechanisms can actually do that, use that. So we pass it through, we authenticate, actually either back into your application or some external service, like an OAuth or LDAP or whatever. So we know that this is a valid user and we're allowed to, we want to allow that user interaction to happen within Jaspersoft. The next step past authentication, just say, is this a good user? Do we want to let them in? Is authorization. How do you set up a user profile to identify that user to Jaspersoft so that we can do all these security things that we'll be talking about? So this gets down to things like roles. It could be you could be doing some things like multi-tenancy with this, which is a very strong part of Jaspersoft. You can identify the tenant. It could be the customer they're a part of. It could be the department they're a part of. It could be many different things. But how do you sort of break up your the user community, and how do you want to use that information to secure the information that's happening with Jaspersoft embedded in the Apple portal? So the sort of things I got here is like, okay, business unit is like the tenant, and maybe there's a sub department. There's got these roles, which can tell you a bunch of things about what people can see and do within Jaspersoft. There's a name, and then there's things like these are not directly related to bike share, but maybe there's additional information that can be used within the security mechanism. So what will, in the bike share app that we'll see in action in a bit, the driver, for example, has a set of routes that they are a part of. So, you maybe want to attach the routes that an individual driver is a part of, and use that to filter data or change what visualization occurs and all that sort of thing. So you go through this authentication authorization process, and you end up with this well-defined user active in Jaspersoft. Every single interaction into Jaspersoft, whether it's visual, whether it's like a REST service or something like that, is always in the context of this authorized and authenticated user. So now we've got that, right? So we've done the description piece, and we're going to use that information to control access to resources. You know, Jaspersoft has got visualizations, dashboards, it's got reports, all stored within it, and you can control through the roles and so on within the that has now been authorized. You can control what people can see and do within Jaspersoft, right? And a lot of that is part of multi-tenancy as well. You can do things like, oh, here's a set of public reports and dashboards and visualizations that everybody has access to. And then there's maybe just some set of things that are just for that particular tenant or department or something like that, or customer. We have a lot of capabilities in the Jasper Report server to manage tenants. So you can do delegated administration to let somebody within your audience who's, say, part of a customer, they can manage things like the permissions in the Jaspersoft environment, or import and export things or something like that. That's actually useful, which the rest of their audiences, rest of the people within that customer or tenant can't do. Okay, so a lot of this, now we've got this well-defined user with all the tenancy and visualizations and all that, and the reports and so on that they can access. You can also use that user profile to limit and control access to data. So you're running a report, or you're working with, as we'll see later, an ad hoc view. That say one report could be used by many different people, but there are things within that, there are rules within that report that pick up values off that user profile and automatically apply filters to the data. So I'm logged in as, you know, I'm a manager in the San Francisco franchise. So I run this one report, or I look at this visualization. When I'm running, I'm only going to see the data relevant, the data related to the San Francisco franchise. And we do that, we can apply those rules, so, roles ABC, roles DEF, different attributes can be used, pulled off that user profile and applied within that. And you end up doing things like, oh, we're going to attach essentially security filters onto all the queries that happen, that are now happening down into the data. So you can do that with our domains, which is, I'll go through in some detail later. But you can also, as I said, include the same sorts of rules in a straight report, and that could go against any data source. You can inject these sorts of values inside any data source. We have, like, maybe you need to pass some additional authentication token to the underlying data source, or REST service, or something like that, that's being used by the report, for example. Okay. Also, one thing I didn't add in here, with domains, you can do column level security as well. Domain is a mapping on top of a, potentially a very large data model. So these security rules that are going to, do the data level filtering, the sort of row by row level filtering in this workhorse. You can also do things like, oh, based on whatever rule, I can hide and show when people are interacting with the domain through ad hoc. I can hide or show columns or parts of the data model as well. So I mean that what's one of the examples? If you see now, look at our test data around the Supermart domain. When you go in as somebody from HR, you can see people's individual salaries in their employee record. But if you're not in HR, you don't have access to that. So, you know, there's a lot of subtlety amongst all this. Okay. So that's the background of authentication, authorization, and use of that user profile within Jaspersoft. So how do we actually implement that? How do we use those components in this bike share demo, right? So the first thing you do with any sort of exercise, like I want to create visualizations and so on for and deliver to an audience, is you need to define your requirements. Forget the technology. You've got these different people coming in or processes coming in into the environment. What are the or what's happening in the application or whatever, right? Start with that. That's what forget the tech. Just focus on what are your visibility requirements. What do you want to allow people to see and do within the application or portal, right? So in the case of the case of bike share, okay, we're managing a bike share franchise here. So a bike share franchise is sort of regional, basically, right? So the sample you'll see in the demo is we're focusing on the San Francisco franchise. It's got multiple regions of San Jose, San Francisco, Berkeley, and Emeryville. And then, so we're allowing a manager to come in and look at their franchise. And we've also got drivers as well. So a driver they're the ones moving around the bikes, okay? Make sure that there's enough bikes there, or fix or take away the broken ones, deliver things around, move things around, right? They're attached to a region, and actually they've got a specific set of routes in that region that they manage. So when they come in, you only want to show them their routes, okay? So managers can see data across the franchise. Managers also have some level of self-service capability. So they can create visualizations within the app through ad hoc and dashboards. But the drivers can't. They just can only consume things. So when you're doing something like this for your own environment, you sort of need to have these high level things about what do you want, what sort of types of people have you got, how do you categorize them, what can they see and do, and then that feeds into how you implement security within the environment. So with those requirements, what do we come along and do? Well, first off, we did a single sign-on. So the bike share app is a React-based web app in the front end, and behind the scenes there's a Jasper report server, which is feeding the visualizations and self-service into that application. So there was so we'll see that when you sign in, you select I'm a manager or a driver. When I clicked on, say, manager, I'm actually doing a single sign-on into Jaspersoft, so that we know that manager's profile. And also for the driver as well. Token-based authentication is probably the simplest, most sort of self-contained thing that you can do in terms of single sign-on. You just agree on a token that contains attributes about the user and roles and other things. The front-end application encrypts the token and sends it off to Jaspersoft, which will decrypt it. And then if it decrypts successfully, it'll say thumbs up, you're authenticated. Oh, here's all the data for authorization. Let's go, type of thing, right? So that was the first sort of thing that we did around security. Get that authentication authorization right, which is always like the first step. So now, okay, we've come in through single sign-on. So we've got, say, the manager dashboard with multiple elements on it. And each of those visualizations are run. They're run in the context of that manager who's logged in. All the data level filtering goes on there. We've also got, when we get into self-service with the manager, we are able to browse visualizations that have been created for them. They can go create more. So they're actually looking at parts of the underlying Jaspersoft resources. And then finally, we've got, with the self-service piece, we've got ad hoc there on top of a domain, and we've got some security rules in there, which is again automatically filtering data, so that the manager's only allowed to see the San Francisco region. So enough of that. Let us go and have a buzz through things, so we can actually see some of this in action, and I'll talk through what's going on. Okay, so this is the bike share demo application. We've got our managers and drivers that I've been talking about. Obviously, this is just a simulation, so it's not simulated data and so on behind the scenes. Some blend of public and generated data. And we sort of made it simple to really focus on the use cases that we wanted to present. So when we click in as manager here and we log in, so that was where that token-based authentication happened. The token was basically created by the front end and sent to the Jaspersoft server as part of its initial sort of connection. And that process of decrypting the token, interpreting in it, and now we've got a user profile in it. So we knew it was a manager. And so what we then went and did was, we did a couple of things. So this data here, is actually coming out of the Jaspersoft server input control, which has got some, security rules in there to sort of only show the franchise and the regions of this particular user in this filter. Okay. So let's go and save and update that, right? So this map is actually also, it's a JavaScript based map from the TIBCO GeoAnalytics package. It's not actually generated by Jaspersoft, it's all just in the front end. But it did go and run a report in Jaspersoft server with that single sign-on happening to give back a chunk of JSON that then basically populated all the points, all the bike share elements here, and then the React thing did its thing to present that information. Down the bottom here, we've also got 3 visualizations, 3 reports. The set of tiles is one report. This is another. This is another. Right? They also all have security filters built into them, so that we can select some other stuff like what did we do? We did last week, last month, and so on. But they can't. They're restricted to only talking about the San Francisco franchise because we're the manager here, right? So when I go and click on total trips, to go and do that, I'm running another visualization again, just for total trips for San Francisco in this particular case. And again, this is active times, most active times for bike activity, basically, right? So lots of fun with that. So that's showing the token-based authentication and the use of security level filters within these reports that actually are always on, so that people can only see the data that they're allowed to see. So now we're going to drop across into Jaspersoft Studio. So these 3 reports were created with Jaspersoft Studio and deployed on the server. And I'll point out, how the security rules basically get into them. So here we are in Jaspersoft Studio, which is the desktop report / visualization designer of Jaspersoft. Just really quickly, a report or visualization. This is this active times one that we were seeing in the application. They connect to data, these whatever data adapter you've got. So and then you lay out the report. In this particular case, it has got basically just this one. It's got a chart and some other elements in the report, like active times and so on there. Little debug thing that only appears when you need to debug. And so the reports, they connect to data. They have one or more queries that they do. This is going against SQL here, but you can go against many different data source types. But in the case of the bike share app, we've got all the data in a Postgres database behind the scenes. Okay, so this is the so we've got this this query, and it's got relatively, it's doing some aggregation and pushing down to get the set of, we're trying to, within a particular given time range, we are going to aggregate the data by hour to look at when the most active periods of the day were for trips starting, basically, right? So the thing that actually really drives into the security piece is this little bit here. Okay, see that $P franchise? So if we look at the parameters with this, we've got this franchise guy. Let's go and edit him for a second. So this parameter franchise is always sent. And actually, I haven't quite done it here, but you can also pick up values from the user profile and inject them into this parameter. So I'm logged in as a manager of the San Francisco franchise. That franchise value is always going to be BA for Bay Area, or there's what's it, Blue Bikes in Boston or something like that, right? So we can pick values off that user profile that we set up, because which we've got the what sort of things have we got in that user profile? I have to actually, we'll go and have a look at that in a tick. Anyway, so that we can pick up these values and automatically inject them in here. I've also got this thing called region in here, and if we have a look at that, it is again a parameter that's passed in. It's actually optional, because sometimes we want to look at active times for the whole franchise. The manager's there. Sometimes we're in a particular region. So we do some things like down the bottom here, we've got this region clause. You can see we've got this $P exclamation mark, region clause. And if we edit this guy, it's got a little expression here, which says if I don't have a region, I just don't have anything in that clause. Otherwise, I add the region ID that I've been given right into the data. So when you're doing just reports level visualizations, you can pick up roles and attributes and other things, the tenant ID and so on, off that user and inject them automatically into the report queries and so on. Now, these, you can also do things like, I don't know, you could use those values off that user that's running the thing to hide and show or change the behavior of the report, and visually. That's also things I've seen people do as well. So you can really, affect the data, but also affect the visualization as well using these values that are being passed in. So let us. Okay. So we've just had a look at how you can use that user within a Jasper report-based visualization. Now we're going to have a look at ad hoc in action, and we'll talk through some of the security things in here. So we'll look at the resources, how resources are controlled and can be displayed, and also talk through the security rules of the domain as well. So here we are back in BikeShare and on this main dashboard, but what we've also exposed is some various aspects of self-service. So when I hit this reports and dashboards icon, what I'm actually doing here is seeing content, ad hoc views and dashboards that were created through the BikeShare application. Right? We can show an existing one, modify selected, and create new ones as well within this. So this is actually using this is just a tree-based visualization React component. It's using, it's behind the scenes using the visualize.js JavaScript library to search the repository in Jaspersoft and present visualizations that are that this particular user, this manager, is allowed to see. We're using some multi-tenancy in there. So this is just a set of visualizations that this manager or their friends or whatever within the San Francisco franchise created. Right? So you can get this sort of work group thing going on where multiple people within, say, a franchise can create and share things within that. And we're just exposing the what's there through the application. So this is pretty straightforward in terms of like just being able to use it. So let's have a look at ad hoc in action here. So this is an ad hoc view in the Jasper report server. I'm on a slightly smaller screen, so if I level, and that's better. Okay. So in this case, I'm just running an existing ad hoc view, visualization. The filter parameters are exposed in that. But I can also come along here and let's go, we can do some things here like, oh, I want to change it to a crosstab, for example. Okay. But let's go and modify and export this thing. So this is interacting with an ad hoc view in Jaspersoft. How is this created? Right. So let's go into there. So what we've got here is a domain which is metadata on top of the BikeShare underlying database. It's broken down by fields and measures. So we've got some franchise information, region information within a franchise, some things about some KPIs and when the KPI was relevant and that sort of thing. And then we've got some measures that are used for calculation purposes. Filters here. We've got some sliders which can affect the level of granularity in the chart. We can flick here to a crosstab pretty quickly, and also tables here, row by row level information. So the whole idea with ad hoc, and this is on top of domain, is that we've got this interactive access to data. I've broken down everything by region, whereas this was back to across all regions, for example, for this particular total trips count, for example. And we could do the same with the rows here too. So this is an interactive level of self-service that you can give your audience. Okay, put in, I don't know, calculate measures and do many things, but what the security aspect of it comes into, we've got, we have these requirements. We've only want to allow the San Francisco manager into their stuff, basically, their data, and you can set up security rules in the domain that automatically add that filtering. So we know that this is a San Francisco manager, so we're automatically going to always add a security rule which filters that experience. So with this, I can come along now and say, I want to save the ad hoc view as, this is, like October 2019. I'm going to stick it in reports. So what I'm seeing here, this is actually part of the, this is actually looking into the Jaspersoft underlying repository, but because we're logged in as a San Francisco tenant, they have only got their area. They've got public area and they've got their tenant level area, and we've got this. They've only actually got one, really just this one folder there to put everything in. So I've just done that, and I want to go save on that guy. So that's now there. So now if we go back, and just, we can export this as Excel and CSV and PDF, as well as do all this save and so on. So now if we go back to here, and we look back in that's the one we just created. So you can create new reports from scratch, modify existing ones, all through the application, and all done in a secure manner, so that the domains are helping you automatically filter that data. And as I mentioned, we haven't done it in BikeShare, but you can also do that column level security. Not show information about regions, for example, if you wanted to go and do that sort of thing too. Okay, we have just been looking at self-service with using the ad hoc editor to allow people to create visualizations and reports. And as I said, underneath it all, we've got our domain infrastructure, which basically enables self-service. So we're going to go and look at domains, particularly how it's run with BikeShare, and particularly how the security rules get injected, and we're actually going to show how to test out these things. It's a bit tricky to get things right, okay? And so let's go and see it. Okay, so domains are managed through the JAS report server, and there is editors to actually allow you to create the domain visually and inject the security rules. So let's just go into the JAS report server now and have a look at that. So here we are. This is the home page of the JAS report server. Your end users will never see this. This will all be, this is really only for administrative purposes. So let's look at the the list of domains, and we're going to go into this BikeShare domain, demo domain. So as it comes up, so the domains have got a few parts to them, as you can probably see. First off, you can connect to a particular data source that's defined in the JAS report server, and you can see the structure of the underlying data. So it's all based on SQL. So any data source that speaks SQL, we can put a domain on top of. Okay, so you can select schemas and the files and so on that you've got within it. Schemas, and then the tables and so forth with that. So that's the sort of first thing. Then you define the joins between them to create a logical data sets, these join trees, for example. You get multiple join trees like subject areas within the domain. In this particular case, the BikeShare application has really only got one large domain, but you can cut them up to make it more consumable for people. And one of the main parts of the join tree is to get all the data connected. So there are things happening like I've got stations here, And there is, why are there two stations? Well, that's because they're joined in different ways. The same table is being accessed through multiple mechanisms here. As you can see, all inner joins and that sort of thing with that. So you build up that structure to connect all the data up. You can pre-filter things, define some automatic filters to not give, it could give like to this year's data or this month's data as part of the domain. So that's the whole physical side. The data management, what's data source you're connected to, what tables you're looking at, how things are joined up, and the pre-filters are all defining really the raw data that's coming into the domain. And then we've got the presentation area, which is how you're going to display all that data to your end user, right? So we just got a list of franchises, stations within a franchise, trips, KPIs, drivers, and routes are all within this domain, and that you're not seeing back here. You see, like the technical names of things, but in the data presentation piece, you're not. You're seeing things that people can understand, basically. And so this is what people are going to drag and drop within the ad hoc editor. So you can translate these. So for example, I can put labels on here, labels and so on, and add resources which in French and Spanish and so on. So you can have one domain that looks that can redisplay things in different languages, particularly, and or add different descriptions into the domain. So this can take a fair while to sort out, because you've got to translate from what could be a mess of data into something that's actually going to make sense for somebody to interact with. Okay, so that's the sort of base structures of the domain, that physical side, tables and columns and so on, and joins, how you're going to present it to people. And the last sort of pass with, there's some options here. And this is where those locale bundles can be loaded up to translate labels and all that sort of stuff. And then there is the fabulous domain security file, which is how security gets injected into a domain. And it's a bit raw, but it ends up being a chunk of XML that has a few paths to it. I'm doing just row level security in here. So what you can do is define a set of these resource access grants that automatically add filters into any queries that happen within around the domain. And so you can also do this is essentially like row level security. There's also column level security as well. So you could say, I don't want to show, for example, what are we doing here? Is data present? You can put column level security to say, I don't want people to have access to drivers and routes, or the driver, the person's name or something like that. That's the column level security stuff, and it uses essentially the same sort of approach that the row level security does. So there'll be bits like the principal expression, when does this security apply? Okay, and so what it's generally looking at is data attached to the user. Could be a username, it could be roles that they have. We'll have a look at users in a second, so you get a sense of what that all is. But essentially, there's a principal expression that says when does security apply, and then for row level security, what filter is going to automatically be added to any query that happens. Okay, so what we're saying here is if the user that's running this has got a tenant ID, we are going to make sure that they only see this system information, system ID thing. They're only going to see systems that match that tenant ID that's off that user. So that's automatically applied. If there's extra joins that need to happen in the domain to go and muck around with it, the domain, the ad hoc engine does that automatically. So it's a very powerful way to do user, basically have, depending on who's logged in, you see different stuff. So let's have a look at users for a sec here. So I'm back in my Jasper report server, and let's have a look at the users. I'm going to leave that guy. So these are all the users that I've got in Jasper report server. And some of these are actually related to bike share. These can be, whenever you do some form of login, either single sign-on or just username password type login, a user will end up within the Jasper report server, this metadata here. Notice that some of these are indicated as being externally defined. So this Fran Manager 1 is externally defined. It comes from single sign-on. They've got some roles attached to them. And then they've got this set of, but also this user is part of this BA organization. So if you look underneath bike share, San Francisco Bay Area, it's bike share BA. And so tenants can be hierarchical. So what we've sort of ended up thinking about is the people who are attached to a particular franchise managers and drivers, they end up having a tenant in the Jasper report server. So we've got the San Francisco Bay Area there attached to that. And now here we've got some additional values related to that. Some of these things are related to logins and that sort of deal there. So that's a list of attributes that are attached to this particular user. So, but really what we're using mostly in the bike share environment is which tenant, like BA, tenant ID of the user, and their roles to control all the security aspects of it. Just quickly look at organizations here for a sec. So this is my bike share San Francisco Bay Area. It's got an organization ID of BA, and it's got its own set of attributes, which it doesn't even know. It's the roles and users and other things like that. So that's pretty cool. Let us go and, so this is users and tenants and how they appear with their attributes and roles and so on, IDs, system ID, BA, etc. So if I go home now, I was mucking around a bit before, and so I created an ad hoc view. So if I look at my repository now, if I look in Bike Share Demo ad hoc, there is the station overview guy, right? So I did the whole, selected the bike share domain and created this. I've just got franchise ID and region ID, and I created a calculated measure called station count. If we edit him, we just see it's we're counting all distinct stations in here. Okay, so we see franchise, region within the franchise. I could actually just come along and say, oh, I want to do, let's put the region name in that, Berkeley, Emeryville, etc. All pretty cool, all right? I've done this as a super user. Super user is a top level user not attached to an organization. So so basically because of the domain that we're working on, we said we only want to add that filter about tenant ID if they have a tenant ID attached to them. They've logged in the context of a tenant. So I can see everything because I'm the super user. Okay, let's save that because I think I like the region name better. So if we save that out, when you develop domains and do all the security bit, one of the, you've got to test it out basically. So the way you do that is, let's have a look at our users now again. And we've got our users driver 1 and franchise manager 1. So the driver has got a driver role, whereas the franchise manager has got a franchise manager role. And those things are used to, those roles are used to change permissions on the Jaspersoft repository so that a franchise manager go and see particular things that a driver can't, for example. The way to do the testing, though, is we've got our domain, we've added our domain security on there. Now I've got these users, and I can log in as that user. Notice how everything changes, right? We've got a theme for this particular tenant, so that's why Franchise Manager 1 has got this green sort of look. Okay, now if we go into that same station overview, ad hoc view that I was just in, look what they can only see. They can only see things related to BA because the filter's automatically being applied. Okay. And so as you're developing a domain and putting these security rules on it, you'll be going back and forth. You'll be trying different users. You'll be trying different rules to allow this to happen. So if I log out of this now, this takes me back to be a super user. I'm going to just show you some of the underpinning stuff here. All right. So when you go into the server settings as a super user, you can look at the ad hoc cache. And the cache has got within it queries, these are the individual queries that run by both me as a super user and me as a franchise manager. And so this one here is one that was done as the franchise manager, and that's where that additional filter automatically got added into the query to actually do that. That's how we do that row level security within the environment. So, normally you're not going to see this sort of thing, but it's actually, as you're developing the domain and playing with the security rules, it's really interesting to see how the actual queries get generated. You actually see what's going on, which is pretty cool. All right, so let's finish up there. So if we go back. All right, lots of stuff going on. So what we did now was we had a look at domains and how they are set up. We looked at how you add the security rules into the domain, and then we tested out those security rules by creating things that were maybe useful across users, but when you went in, for a particular domain, and then you can log in as different users to see the effect of that, to get it all right. Okay. Oop. All right. Over to Shane.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherman, for the slides, the demo. Yeah, a lot of detail was shared there, and the idea was that we wanted to give kind of full visibility in terms of how some of this is implemented for the demo app. And here in a second, we're going to have one more slide, but we'll point you to a workshop that's related to this particular webinar in the series that will dive into this in even more detail, and just provide you a different way to consume this information than this webinar. But, the beginning, Sherman, you took us through just in general what things you need to think about when we talk about security and embedded BI. We saw how it was implemented in the demo app, saw self-service in action and how domains was kind of a big part of that in terms of delivering self-service in a secure way. And now, if you don't mind, we covered a lot of material today, and we've been doing this in the entire webinar series. What are the kind of main takeaways that we want to leave the audience with before we get into that final slide where we share some resources?
Okay. So here's the sort of top things that, as we were going through this, I was thinking of. So when you start defining how you want to embed things, think about your audiences, and also think about what information they can see or can't see, and that gets you starting to think about who they are, what they're a part of, what their roles are, right? And then in non-technical terms, really specify what that user experience should be in terms of visualizations or data that appears within the visualizations or whatever. So once you've done that, you can define, well, what's this user profile that for the individual users? What do they need? What are they attached to? Are they attached to customers and tenants or something like that, or departments? What roles do they have? What can they see and do at that sort of level? Maybe what reports and ad hoc views they're allowed to see, for example. Are there additional attributes that you want to tack onto things? For example, that in the domain stuff, we were using that tenant ID to sort of automatically inject values into some of the domain access, and those things can also be injected into reports, as we talked about previously for some of the static reports or the static visualizations that were embedded in the dashboard. So really, when you're thinking about self-service, there are different levels. Sometimes you've got just want more of a static, less interactive type of view, but really the best, if you're wanting to give more of a experience where your end audiences can create their own visualizations through the browser with ad hoc, domains are the way to go and do that. They are the most flexible. They have the best control over how things appear. You don't stick stuff in sort of technical terms. There are, if you want to go down the translation route, that's in there. It's also got some really high-level ways to apply security into that set of data. And then, this last bit is, you start with your requirements at the top, you've got this user profile, and now you've got these flexible domains that implement those security rules into the domain based on all the other things that you know. That would be the key couple of takeaways from my sort of perspective.
All right, and now if we quickly wrap up with sharing a few ways that you can get involved with the demo app. The first way is obviously this webinar series. Again, this is the 5th and final, so ongoing should be changed to the series is complete. All these are available. These next 3 resources are available through Jaspersoft community. So the second thing that I'll point you to, again, check all these out from the same spot in community, that's a part of the link in the webinar description, is the guided demo app, which is what I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar. And that just walks you through at a high level. You saw a lot of pieces from this in Sherman's demo, but step by step, the narrative for the demo app and shows how Jaspersoft fits into it. So just really good context if you're seeing this for the first time. The third thing is workshops. And we've developed 3 workshops that we're launching with this initial launch of the webinar series that are dissecting different parts of the demo app. One's on the data visualization and report design process. The second one's on the embedding and integration of Jaspersoft into the app. And the third one is really focused on what we covered today, which is more around the security and self-service aspects of the demo app. So those are all available now on Jaspersoft community. And the final thing, which is available from the same spot, is access to all the source code for the application and the data set, which was important to us because we wanted to give you guys full visibility, and so that if you wanted to reverse engineer or dissect various aspects of the application from a more technical standpoint, that would all be available to you. So again, check this out on Jaspersoft community. I'll just give one more thank you to Sherman for this webinar and through all the webinars that you helped throughout the series. And thank you to the audience. If you just attended this one or if you attended the whole series, we hope this was helpful. And we look forward to hearing some of your comments and thoughts on the webinar series and the workshops. But this is something that we're planning to extend and really build more material around as we continue to talk more and more about embedded BI and this particular demo app. So thanks again for your attendance and your attention, and we'll wish you all the best with your embedded BI projects.